and give us ears to hear. Amen. Please be seated. So, I want to try a little experiment with everybody. I want you to pick something small that's far away from you. Let's see, could be one of the candles, one of the flower arrangements, one of the word psalm maybe on the hymn board, something far away. Once you have your focus, I want you to make a little triangle. And kids, you can try this too. Make a little triangle with your hands, and I want you to put it over that thing you're focused on. Okay, once you have it in the triangle, I want you to close one of your eyes. Did it move? Okay, now open that eye and close the other one. Yeah, so it's gone, right? You open one eye, it stays the same. You close the other eye, vanishes. All of us have one dominant eye. I'm right-handed, for example, but I'm left eye dominant. So when I close my left eye, it goes away. Interesting that a tiny shift in perspective can cause you to see something in a totally different way. Sometimes the problem that seems like the only thing you can see goes away if you look at it from slightly different perspective. Sometimes the solution that was invisible can be found with just a tiny shift in perspective. And if there's one thing Jesus is still teaching me, with varying degrees of success, depending on the day, is the importance of perspective. The story of Jesus feeding a crowd of 5,000 men, plus all of their family, is the only miracle story that appears in all 4 of the Gospels. So already we can agree there was something important about this story, important enough that all 4 Gospel writers agreed it's going in. And before we dive in, we need to put ourselves in Jesus' shoes. Our lectionary passage did us a bit of a disservice in that it didn't connect this miracle with what had happened before it. Our passage started off with Jesus withdrew to a deserted place by himself. What it didn't say is that right before this passage, Jesus had learned that John the Baptist, his relative, mentor, and friend, had been beheaded. That's the context when it says Jesus wanted to withdraw to a deserted place by himself. So he's grieving, he's sad, he's exhausted. He probably wants to be alone so he can remember his mentor, his friend, his relative. But by now, Jesus is a famous teacher and miracle worker. So wherever he goes, people follow. So even though he's sad and tired and just wants to be alone, people followed him. So he got off the boat, sees the crowd, and instead of feeling frustrated that he just couldn't get 1 second to be by himself, to grieve, instead of looking at the crowd and projecting all of his sadness and frustration onto them, he looked at them with love and felt compassion. Already we see the importance of perspective. Instead of being focused on his own grief and his own tired body, Jesus was also able to see the crowd in front of him and know that this was a crowd of hungry, desperate, scared people who wanted a miracle. So he went among them and healed their sick. By the time the sun was setting, the disciples, who probably were also tired and sad and ready for a break, come up to Jesus and say, all right, teacher, the hour is late, and after all, you took us to this deserted place, and there's nowhere to get any food, so why don't you send the people home? They can go down to the villages and buy their own dinner, and we can finally have a moment's peace. That's not what it says. That's the Gospel of Hillary. But that's what I think that they were thinking. And finally have a moment's peace. They were probably also just as sad and tired as Jesus was. But instead of that, Jesus looks at them, and I just picture him smiling, still tired, still sad, but smiling, and said, they need not go away. You give them something to eat. And the disciples' response, of course, is a problem of perspective. They said, we have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. You can see already, they were determined to be unsatisfied, right? We have nothing except these few things. Well, Jesus is an excellent teacher on top of being a healer and a provider, so he uses this moment to teach his friends how to look at things in a new way. How to let go of their mindset of scarcity and embrace a mindset of abundance. He took those 5 loaves and 2 fish, blessed them, broke them into pieces, and gave them back to the disciples to pass out the pieces to the people. And remember, this is a crowd of hungry, desperate people. I think this miracle started out as a quiet one, at least the way I'm picturing it. I don't picture an immediate, instantaneous multiplying of bread and fish. Instead, what I'm picturing is each disciple being handed a little basket of little pieces. And maybe they hand the basket to the first person to pass down a row. And as the basket goes, it just never is empty. This miracle would have taken a little time, if it happened that way, to catch everyone's attention. And by the end, there were 12 full baskets of leftovers. This multiplying would have happened quietly and inevitably. Those loaves and fish that the disciples considered barely better than nothing became the miracle that fed thousands and thousands of people, far more than 5,000. So I wonder when we have been like the disciples. When have we looked at a challenge and our resources and declared, we have nothing except these few things. We only have these few things. And if the resource you're referring to is people, imagine how that might feel to hear. The church worldwide has become quite guilty of this way of thinking. We've made a habit worldwide, churches all over the world, saying things like, we have no young families, or we only have this small group of volunteers who are doing all the work, or there is nothing but corruption and greed out in the world. How can we make a difference? The good news is that Jesus teaches us a different way of thinking. Jesus' message over and over is one of abundance. In the Gospel of John, at the wedding in Cana, after Jesus' mother passively, aggressively gets him to intervene and turn the purification water into wine, he creates the equivalent of over 1,000 bottles of wine for a little family wedding that's almost over. In Luke, he tells Peter, who is tired after fishing all night with no luck, throw out your net one more time. And Peter does, and the net comes back so full of fish that it starts to break. and another boat has to come in and help them get all the fish. And as we saw today, after 5,000 hungry men and all their family members were fed from 5 loaves and 2 fish, there were 12 full baskets of leftovers after every one of those poor, hungry people had eaten until they couldn't have another bite. The gospel is one of abundance. But sometimes we are looking at things through the wrong eye, and all we see is what we lack, what isn't there. A tiny shift in perspective can change everything. We have nothing but these 2 fish and 5 little loaves of bread. Well, don't you remember what God can do with bread and fish? We are just a small group of people. Don't you remember how God changed the course of history with a group of 12 friends who more often than not got it wrong? I am only one person. I am just one person. I am only a child. I am only whatever. One person. Well, don't you remember what God can do with just one little boy's shared meal? How much more then can God do with all of the many blessings around us every day? Amen.